Welcome to the call, everybody. Welcome, Simran. Thank you for sharing your time with us and walking us through all of the opportunities at Equal Ventures. Just a quick introduction on the organizations putting this event together. I'm representing Work on Climate. So for those of you who have not come to the event or not encountered the event through the Work on Climate channel, please check out workonclimate.org and join our Slack community. And we're actually co-hosting this event with Innovate Climate, which is a newsletter related to climate opportunities. And Pranav is representing Innovate Climate today. My name is Utkarsh Vaidya. I am the events lead for Work on Climate, and I'll be co-hosting the call today. Pranav, would you like to introduce yourself and then also introduce Simran?
Yep. Thanks a lot, Utkarsh. Thank you for this. Thank you, Simran, for being here. A warm welcome to everybody who's attending the call. Really appreciate and love the turnout. Very quickly, my name is Pranav Khanna. I'm calling in from Mumbai, India. I am volunteering with Innovate Climate Careers. And this is a newsletter around job openings as well as candidates in the climate tech space. What's different about this particular newsletter is that we make all efforts to engage, enable conversations between openings, the people who post them and the candidates. So we want to make it more personal. We don't want it to be just another application that you send to an email ID. We want conversations to happen. So that's the thought process behind Innovate Climate Careers. Look us up on the Substack. There will be links provided, as Utkarsh will share shortly. Moving on very quickly, I just want to introduce Simran. And we are very happy to have her here. She's an investor at Equal Ventures. Prior to joining Equal, Simran was introduced to venture through internships at Greenspring Associates, SoGal Ventures, and VC-backed startup Predata. She's also worked as Managing Partner of JHU's student-run fund, A-Level Capital. At A-Level, she led numerous investments in early-stage companies founded by Hopkins students, alumni, and faculty. She's a graduate of the Johns Hopkins University, where she received a BA in International Studies and Sociology through the Global Social Change and Development Program. Welcome, Simran. Really glad to have you here, and love the fact that we have this amazing audience waiting to know more. All yours.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much for the introduction as well. I guess maybe we can just kick things off by running through the deck, and I can give everyone a bit of background on Equal, myself, how we think about investments broadly, and then also how we think about investments specifically into climate. Cool. All right, so just getting started. So actually, maybe I'll give just some additional background on Equal and myself and my journey into venture and climate as well before we dive into more of our investment strategy. So I joined Equal a year and a half ago after completing my undergrad at Johns Hopkins. And like Pranav said, I double majored in International Studies and Sociology. With that, I was in a track program focused on development economics and global social change. And so I was actually first introduced to the world of climate and sustainability through the lens of sociology, and really looking globally. And a lot of that was very kind of academic oriented work, as you can imagine. After I graduated, I joined the team at Equal. Quick background on Equal is that we are a seed stage firm based out of New York City, although we invest across the US and North America. For us, we will typically lead rounds at the seed stage with checks of $1.5 to $2 million. We are super thesis driven in everything that we do, which I'll get into in a little bit. And we spend time in 5 key investment areas. Those are energy and sustainability, supply chain and logistics, insurance and employee benefits, retail, and the care economies, which for us means anything from like childcare to senior care to women's health. I spend the majority of my time leading all of our work in the world of energy and sustainability. Then I also lead our work in the care economies and the employee benefits portion of insurance and benefits too. Cool. Jump into the deck then. So really quickly, thinking about Equal's investment strategy and just where we see ourselves positioned in the market broadly. So we think about everything from the lens of innovation cycles. And this is actually based off of the work of an economist named Carlotta Perez, who published a number of books and theories around innovation cycles and market cycles, and really like the difference between the installation period to the deployment period and the turning point that occurs in between. We believe that today we are currently at a turning point. What that means is that we are seeing increased kind of tension between innovation and labor, also just like generally geopolitical tension and things like that. What we feel strongly about is that the turning point really marks the kind of point in time after which technology becomes kind of deployed across a number of industries and spaces and to different communities where it hadn't really been previously accessible before. So when we think about our investments, we really try to focus on that, the deployment of technology and finding ways to kind of better distribute technology and different resources into industries and communities where, like I said, it hadn't really been previously accessible. That's a large part of the reason why we've chosen to focus on the 5 industries that we have. And just in terms of like our actual investments from a tactical perspective, that means that we are typically looking at companies that are more focused on like software solutions or business model innovation, as opposed to companies that are focused on developing like new technologies, which I think you would typically see around the worlds of like hardware and deep tech and frontier tech. So our approach to climate and just in general, our prepared mind approach, which I think I have another slide about. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a great segue into our approach for climate. Like I said, we really tend to focus on software solutions and business model innovation and really finding new ways to kind of think through distribution. I think one of the really interesting things about the world of energy and sustainability and climate is that historically, there has been kind of low willingness to pay on part of a lot of customers, despite the need for like very, very deep need for a lot of the climate solutions that are out there on the market. Really, like, I think this applies to any of the many, many, many sub verticals that fall under the umbrella of climate. And we think that that presents a super interesting challenge. That means that for us, like I said, there's a demonstrated need there. It's really just about figuring out that path to market and figuring out how to really get into different purchasing patterns, whether on the enterprise side, on the consumer side, anything that you can think of. And so we kind of bring that lens of thought to everything that we do in climate. And then lastly, and I think most importantly about Equal is our prepared mind process. So I think I briefly mentioned at the beginning when I was walking everyone through our background on Equal, that we are super thesis driven in everything that we do. So for us, our thesis exists down to like a micro level for specific company opportunities. For our climate company in our portfolio right now, David Energy, which we'll chat about as well when I kind of walk through the different job opportunities there. You can actually see our investment thesis that we open sourced in our investment announcement for David Energy, which is online on our website and on Equal's Medium page in Substack. But yeah, for us, like before going out and speaking to founders and spaces, we really try to take the time to develop a prepared mind and make sure that we can understand the ins and outs of very specific company opportunities. And then we try to bring that information to our conversations with founders. We also definitely leverage that information post-investment as well to make sure that we can kind of play a hands-on role in our portfolio support. For us, our research process and our prepared mind process is really about bridging the digital divide between the industry and the innovators. So we spend a lot of time talking to folks who might be on what is considered like the industry side or the incumbent side, and really trying to get their perspective and understand their pain points, challenges, questions, insights, and make sure that we're bringing that to all of the work that we do when we are meeting with founders and actually investing in companies across all 5 of our key investment areas. You can see here on the screen just a couple of examples of some of the types of work that we do when we think through our investment theses. they're very much based on pulling out, the key like second order insights, I would say, as opposed to more general market information. And when we go out and meet with founders, we'll use these as a guide for our diligence process. So they're not a hard and fast rule by any means. They really are something that's like very iterative for us. I think we're constantly going back and like revising our deep dives and our investment theses as we find new information in the market, or as we learn more and that kind of thing. And yeah, this is exactly what enables us to go so deep into a number of different spaces. And we do this across all 5 of our investment areas as well. Cool. So that's all I had on the deck side. So I will stop sharing my screen. I guess not sure if you guys want to jump right into the like job discussion, or if you wanted to pause for any like questions or answers, that kind of thing around Equal and our investment strategy.
Maybe let's answer any questions if there are any on the audience. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, can I chime in with a quick question? I guess I'm wondering, I'm both a job seeker and potential startup, in ideation phase. And if I'm at the point where I'm ready to start giving pitches, is there, a little bit you can talk about how that process might look?
Yeah, I guess, are you, just to clarify and make sure I'm understanding correctly, are you asking like how that process might work at Equal, or just like as a whole, you feel like you're ready to start going out and starting those conversations with investors, whoever they may be?
Both.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we definitely try to be as open and responsive as possible on, our email and our Twitter DMs, on LinkedIn and things like that. I will say sometimes things can fall through the cracks because we are all juggling a lot of balls, but we try to be super, super responsive through those lenses or those like channels and means. And I think for us, this will differ from investor to investor when it comes to what they look for in an early stage company. I will say that at Equal, we don't really look for a specific revenue number, specific traction number for companies that are coming through our pipeline and that we're meeting with. We know that will differ from business model to business model and industry to industry. So for us, it's really more about alignment on like first principles of the space and really understanding the founder's strategy for key decisions that they've made in management of their business. And so, yeah, those are like some of the things that we would want to focus on in an early conversation. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, yeah. And what's the best way to reach out?
You can reach me over my email, which it should be online. I'm happy to also shoot you a note afterwards. You can also reach me on Twitter or LinkedIn as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for answering that, Simran. We do have a few more questions coming in. So I think one of these around entry-level positions, we can probably get to that after we cover some of the open roles right now. There are a few other ones that are a bit more general around the philosophy. The first one's, what are you most excited about as climate opportunity areas, given your thesis or focus?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. So I will say we did just put out a climate themes post for 2022, which I will shoot the link in the chat in case anyone is interested. And I think this is a good job of summarizing some of the key areas that we're going to be having our eye on in 2022 as a firm. I think for me in particular, I am super excited about different opportunities and angles to help better enable the energy transition. So one of the kind of core guiding principles that we feel super strongly about at Equal is that energy is really hitting its like internet moment, where before it used to be kind of more like a linear, bidirectional, but still linear supply chain. Now energy really exists in a like distributed but connected web or network, and it is becoming increasingly so every single day. And we think that presents an opportunity to, create data connectivity services to better enable developers to underwrite new types of DERs, both in the commercial electrification space and the residential electrification space. And we also think that this enables like potentially the occurrence or like widespread distribution of new technologies around the world of like virtual power plants and demand response and DERMS, really anything that allows for more flexible and real-time interoperability of devices so that energy can really be, I would say, more holistic, I think, than existing energy infrastructure was built for. We just believe that that's really where the future will be. And so I think there's a number of different opportunities there, company opportunities. I listed a few. There's definitely some more laid out in our climate themes post as well. Another area that we are super excited about at Equal is the world of the circular economy and really building circular infrastructure to better enable businesses to kind of stand up reverse logistics on their own. I think this is something that, we spent a lot of time thinking about it in the world of apparel and fashion in 2021. Since then, I think we've started to take note of potential catalysts in other sectors as well. In particular, when it comes to like food and beverages and grocery and hospitality, seems like there's a ton of interesting opportunity there. Also around beauty as well. I think for us, tangentially interested in the world of like plastics and chemicals and battery recycling, although that does tend to be a little bit out of scope for where our current focus is, given that there's usually some, material sciences components in there as well. But do you think that that's interesting?
A somewhat related question around this same theme is, can you tell us more about how your specific investment strategy is differentiated from other firms in the energy and sustainability space?
Yeah, I think for us, it really is that we go so deep. I think our work on David Energy is a really great example. When we were kind of going out and doing diligence on David Energy, we went and we met with every single commercial energy efficiency company out there. We really try to do our best to find kind of an asymmetric advantage with the information that we pull out from our research. And I think a large part of that is the fact that we are so focused on bridging the digital divide. I think it can be all too easy to say, forget the folks at energy consulting firms or forget the folks at utilities. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think all of those entities are going to be incredibly critical for the energy transition and for, investing in companies in climate that can kind of last through multiple market cycles. And so I would say for us in the way we develop our perspective, I think that definitely lends some differentiation, but as a whole, it really is just that we go so deep and we really try to cover every single base possible.
Thank you for sharing that insight. I think that builds upon some of the bringing a prepared mind perspective that you mentioned earlier, as well as talking to some of the incumbents that you mentioned earlier as well. I think another more personal question for you is, were you around the JHU fund? Were you part of raising that fund? If so, what was the process like? If not, how did your work there prepare you for a full-time role in venture?
Sure. So quick context on A-Level, which is the student-run fund at Johns Hopkins. It is structured like any other early stage venture fund, has kind of a LP base made up of a variety of individuals and institutions and family offices and the like. Hopkins is not an LP, so A-Level is only connected to Hopkins in name, only by investing into pre-seed and seed stage companies founded by Johns Hopkins alumni. A little bit different than I think your traditional early stage student-run venture firm where the university endowment is typically a sole LP. That is not the case with A-Level. And the other piece that I think is a little bit different is that we actually the firm actually primarily invests into companies founded by Hopkins alumni. The entire team, though, is run by undergraduate students. So it really was like a crash course in venture, as a member of the student team and as a managing partner my senior year. So roughly a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were responsible for everything from diligence to, LP relations to portfolio support, to recruiting new investors and training the new investors, sourcing companies, hosting events. I would say it definitely prepared me very well for my role at Equal. I think gave me a ton of skills on the operational side, but also gave me the opportunity to really interact one-on-one with founders in a way that I think not many people still getting an education are able to have. And so I feel very, very fortunate and privileged to have had that opportunity. And yeah, so I'm an advisor to the firm now. I'm not involved in, any of their investments or anything of the like. I'm mainly there just as, a resource, as someone who works in venture and was once on this team as a student while I was at Hopkins.
Great, thanks, Simran. Another question, I guess, that's a bit related to this, and perhaps after this, we can move on to the open roles that you have.
Yeah.
So since you've seen a lot of these types of organizations or early stage ventures, what are some of the most common mistakes or red flags that you've seen from early stage organizations?
Yeah, I think the biggest is focusing like just on product or just on brand. To some of my earlier points that I mentioned around the fact that we really think we are about to enter a massive, massive deployment period. I think that means that it is really tough to win on just product or just brand, especially in the world of sustainability. I think it really is critical to think through your path to market and your go-to-market strategy and your pricing and how that informs the way that you as a founder or as an early stage organization are navigating competitive dynamics. I think in particular, as climate tech gets more and more and more interest and more and more kind of like capital that needs to be deployed, that will increasingly become important to investors. I think in general, all of those trends kind of pushing climate tech up are really great, but it is just something to be mindful of as an early stage founder in the space, that it can create competitive dynamics that require slightly more intention, I would say, when navigating.
Just a small follow-up on that from my own side. So I was wondering, can you give us an example of perhaps a company that had a promising product that or other advantages where you modified the way that they were thinking about the go-to-market approach, or otherwise help them reconfigure that in some way to be a bit more successful? Or have you encountered a situation like that in the past?
Yeah, I think this is actually something that we have encountered quite a bit in general. And part of the reason why we feel like comfortable having those conversations with founders is because we feel like we're showing up with a prepared mind, and we can kind of bring all of our research and really make it be more of a two-way street. So it's not ever a situation, just to preface the story, not ever a situation where we're going to a founder and saying, hey, like, you need to change this, like, there's no other option, that kind of thing. It really is more like a brainstorming kind of situation. I think one of the earlier points that I mentioned in climate is just like this historically irrationally low willingness to pay. What that means is that sometimes like pricing models and business models that have worked in other industries where there is higher willingness to pay don't really scale as efficiently in certain like subsectors within the larger umbrella of climate. And one business model in particular that we tend to see a lot of founders rely on, because it does make sense in a lot of other industries, is like SaaS, like recurring monthly fees. When there's low willingness to pay, it can be tough to get customers to pay that fee on a monthly, recurring basis. And so one of the things that we tend to think about is like, okay, is there a way to create kind of volume-based pricing or usage-based pricing, something that really aligns the company in question with its customers. So when its customers, are doing better, they're optimizing their operations, they're getting more projects in the door, they're saving more energy, we also win. So kind of matching those incentives, I think, has been something that we think a lot about internally at Equal. And we have seen this, we've kind of had conversations around this topic across a number of different subverticals in sustainability and climate broadly, whether more focused in the circular economy or more focused on, different types of companies within the world of power markets, or, developers either doing, new installations or retrofits, or, just pure energy efficiency companies and things like that.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that perspective. I think we can move on to the actual open roles that you have. I think you mentioned that you do have some for David Energy. Should we dive into those?
Yeah, that would be great. Cool. So I guess I can just talk through a couple of them. So David Energy is hiring for a number of roles right now. One in particular, yeah, I'm on the career page of their website, which I will just also send this link in the Zoom chat, just in case anyone wants to follow along on their own computer. So David Energy is hiring for a number of roles right now. Quick background on David Energy. So they are a new kind of energy supplier. David Energy, they offer a commercial energy management system to small commercial buildings to start, and then use that to gain a line of sight into demand and monetize as a retail energy provider. And so in that sense, they're kind of flipping the traditional like energy provider model on its head by really looking to manipulate demand rather than trying to manipulate purely supply. And so David Energy is based in Brooklyn, in New York City. And yeah, like I said, they're hiring for a number of roles right now, across a number of different kind of levels of seniority, from VP of engineering to director of product, director of talent acquisition, director of energy engineering, all the way down to business development analyst, and application engineers and software engineers. So I guess there are a number of roles here. I don't know if it would be helpful for me to like talk through every single one. Each of those, if anyone is interested, you can click the link. There are job descriptions there. Happy to connect with folks afterwards if they are interested, or you have someone in your network who might be interested to kind of offer more information on David Energy or answer any questions. But this is really like the bulk of our climate hiring that we are doing in our portfolio right now.
Thanks for sharing those opportunities, Simran. So a usual question that we get on this call, let me just preempt probably the question that's on a lot of folks' mind, is how large of a part does domain experience play into hiring, and what is the spectrum of roles that is available in terms of work experience? So how many entry-level roles, any internship opportunities, et cetera, all the way to folks that might be very experienced in their careers and are looking to make a transition, but perhaps don't have direct domain experience. How does that sort of pan out with these opportunities?
Yeah, so I think that there are a couple of roles here that will require some domain experience, particularly as you think through, director of energy engineering and kind of VP of engineering, perhaps even director of product as well. The only like pure entry level role I would say is the business development analyst role. All the other roles do have some requirements in terms of years of experience, and then also like actual like more qualitative requirements I would say around the type of experience. I think the biggest thing I will mention is like David Energy is an early stage company. They are a like seed, Series A, that level of early stage company. And so for anyone interested in these roles, you would kind of need to be willing to take on a more fast-paced environment, kind of like your typical early stage company. So not really, growth stage or anything more mature than that.
Thank you. And there are a few questions around this from earlier, which we can maybe address now. So there's a question around data, which is from your industry bird's eye view, I think relating to the energy world. Are there any specific types of data that the world is really lacking, particularly thinking in relation to DERMS and grid management?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And this is something that we have spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about at Equal and across our network of like operators and industry experts. I think the biggest type of data that's lacking is real-time demand and pricing data from DERs and energy stakeholders. You can get, billing data and interval data through a number of different channels right now, but none of it is in real time. And what that means is that it's really, really hard to enable real-time interoperability and actually become kind of proactive in your load management. And that has massive cost implications. I mean, we have we have seen and heard of so many in just the past like year and a half, I would say, from the big winter storm in Texas to, the heat waves, the floods, really any kind of unforeseen event that has impacted the grid. I think that is like the biggest data need in energy today. Part of the reason why we have such a deep need for this right now goes back to the point that I made earlier around the fact that I think energy really is so much more holistic than it has ever been before. Where before, I think, relationships between stakeholders in energy really used to exist between like the customer and the utility. I think now, like, you're starting to see more and more and more entities get involved in that mix, whether they are DER aggregators or, property managers in a commercial building, or EV charging infrastructure, network management companies or solar developers. There are more and more and more entities out there who, also need access to this real-time pricing and demand data, but have no way of really getting access to it. Or if they do, it is not in real time, or the data may not be of the highest quality. And so it's just not as impactful as it could be. And so, yeah, if anyone else is thinking about this space or, has feedback on anything that I've mentioned, definitely reach out. I would love to chat about it. Like I said, it's an area where we spend a lot of time internally at Equal.
Another common question, Simran, that we get on a lot of these VC calls is, what advice would you give folks in terms of their applications themselves? So how would you recommend folks reach out for roles that they're interested in? Any tips or advice to make themselves stand out from the rest of the field?
Yeah, I think so I guess maybe I'll answer your last couple of questions first. I would say apply for the roles directly through the David Energy website. You can feel free to shoot me a note. I'm just going to put my email into the Zoom chat so everyone knows how to reach out to me. Feel free to shoot me a note directly, and we can kind of go from there if you do have additional questions, or want to like learn more about any of the roles listed on the David Energy website, or also across our portfolio. A number of our portfolio companies are hiring right now as well, although not kind of strictly related to climate, I would say. In terms of making yourself stand out, I think that is definitely going to differ from role to role and what the different roles are focused on. One high level comment that I can make is really the most important thing is showing your passion and your drive. A lot of times in an early stage company, which I feel comfortable saying this because at Equal, we consider ourselves like a startup as well. Like, we're operating out of our first fund right now. And, definitely kind of building a lot of stuff from the ground up. And so probably pretty similar to what it's like working at an early stage startup in many ways. Yeah, you just kind of got to be willing to take on anything, and really be self-motivated and self-directed. I think in general, the world of climate and climate tech has so much opportunity that it can be pretty easy to, be proactive and be motivated when there is so much opportunity. But I think that's the biggest kind of thing I would say to drill down on in your applications and, any conversations that you have across any of these roles. Outside of that, I would say, look through the requirements, and try to anchor onto those.
That's very helpful advice. Thank you for that, Simran. Another common question that we get on these calls, because we reach a global audience, is, in general, with your investment philosophy, are there any attempts, present or future, around investing globally, especially in Southeast Asia or the global South? Any opportunities that you're looking into there, or any future endeavors?
Yeah, it is something that we are considering. For us, our focus is really just on North America today. Part of that reason is that, we do go really, really deep in these spaces, and we do build out these, industry expert networks is a large part of our work. And so we want to make sure that if we're investing in a different geography, we can do that exact same thing. So for us to kind of get comfortable, getting to that point, it just is going to require some time and some legwork on our end. And so that's something that is, an active conversation internally. But I think we'll be, like I said, some time before we are kind of at the point where we are investing truly like globally out of our firm.
Great. So I'll open up the floor to any questions that might be there in the audience. Feel free to unmute and ask any questions that you have. Looks like we have one question on the chat that I'll read out from David. Can you give a failure example for some investment opportunities, founder ideas that seemed great, but did not pan out?
Yeah, I think honestly, the biggest example is that challenge that I had mentioned earlier around really focusing on like just winning on product alone, or just winning on brand or brand positioning alone. I think it can seem like that is easy to do. In reality, it's very, very, very tough. And I think the way to make that work is by focusing on, path to market and how you're thinking through distribution and go to market. And so that is probably like the most common example that I've come up with. I will say though that in situations, with founders where, we might have met them early on, we might have been kind of keeping track and, having, regular brainstorming conversations and that kind of thing over time. If their original or initial idea doesn't pan out, oftentimes the learning process that they go through from figuring out why it didn't pan out brings them up onto, another kind of idea that could work. And so it's a little bit of a iterative cycle, if you will. But I think in particular that focus on winning on product alone or brand positioning is perhaps the best example I can come up with.
I think that's a really interesting anecdote you shared there, Simran. Can you share some more details on, or maybe an example of when that iterative process sort of happened in the past, where perhaps the initial idea was not perfect, but then through the process of kind of learning through the failure of that idea, there was something that was a bit of a better fit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into the specifics of any companies and kind of share any confidential details. But what I can share is different methods that I think some founders that we've worked with have used to kind of work through some of those open questions and challenges and potentially failures to really happen upon an idea that, ended up being a really, really interesting and exciting business. And actually, I think the thing that has ended up working for most founders is really talking to people in the industry and really talking to like the people at the incumbents. Like I said before, it can be so easy to ignore that side of the market, but it is so, so, so critical to building a lasting and sustainable business in the space. Really having like that kind of boots on the ground experience and perspective is so valuable, I think. I mean, we've seen that in so many spaces. We've seen that in, the world of logistics, in the world of insurance, in the world of, the circular economy, in the world of solar developers and storage developers and, project finance firms and things like that. And so for a lot of the founders that we've worked with who have been in that situation, the thing that really kind of moved the needle for them was having those conversations with the people who had been in the industry for, 20, 30 years and getting their perspective and seeing, what had worked in the past versus not worked, what solutions lasted through multiple market cycles in the past, why did they last through multiple market cycles in the past? And then for those founders, really parsing through all of that information and figuring out, hey, like out of all of these different data points, for me and my team, because of our backgrounds, we feel that we are best suited to take on XYZ, of them. And so it's kind of a two-part process, I would say, that we have seen work, where one part is really leaning on like the objective fact of what has happened in the industries historically. And two, it's a little bit more subjective, is thinking about like you as a team, what are your strengths? What are you passionate about? What type of business do you feel like you're, best positioned to build? That will definitely look different from team to team. And that's okay, it should, right? Everyone is different. Everyone has a unique lived experience and a unique background. And so it's figuring out how to leverage that to really solve the problems that you're most excited about. So hopefully that kind of gives you some more context on how we've seen the process play out in the past, just from like a more tactical perspective. I think the other thing that has worked well kind of in the same vein as, talking to folks from the industry, is really like finding your kind of circle of people that you can openly have conversations with, whether it is other founders working maybe not on the same idea, but in the same industry, former operators, angel investors, early stage investors, that kind of thing. People that you can really just like go to. It could be, your former colleagues at your old job, whoever it is, people that you can go to and just kind of have those open conversations with, I think has been helpful.
Just pulling on that sort of thread of team expertise, there's another related question. I think you answered a portion of it, but just wondering if you would like to add anything else. The question is, can you share some insight into the process that you take to build industry expertise in the different climate tech segments? So perhaps maybe to reframe it a bit, if you want to build expertise in a new segment, or you start feeling passionate about maybe a different area, what would the process or the principles be that you would follow to gain more insight into it?
Yeah, that's also a very, very good question. You guys have great questions today. I will say also preface my answer with, everyone and even everyone within my team kind of approaches things a little bit differently. So I'll speak for myself with this answer. I will typically start off by going out, just like reading as much as I can and really figuring out what my key questions are in the space, related to business model, different market players, competitive dynamics, literally any question. How does a product work? How does an existing technology work? Anything like that. And then I'll go out and try to find answers to those questions myself. And I'll kind of repeat the process until I feel like I've, distilled that question list down into something that is a little bit more compact and kind of like condensed. And once I feel like I'm at that point, that's when I kind of start going out and reaching out to industry experts. And usually I will just, shoot them a note over email, over LinkedIn, anything like that. People that I think, might have an interesting perspective or can help me answer any of those questions on my list. Our research process, like we just kind of, for me in particular, I'll say, I just kind of go through that process over and over and over again. And along the way, as I have those conversations with industry experts, I will always do my best to kind of go back and share any new learnings that I have. Obviously, not sharing any confidential information or anything like that, but any like high level learnings and all of that, always kind of try to make sure that I'm keeping everyone in the loop that I have chatted with. And yeah, that's how we kind of go about building our expert networks.
Great. There's a kind of switching gears a bit to the opportunity specific questions. We have a question here around if you really resonate with an early stage startup company's mission and product, what is the best way to get involved if there isn't an open posting that's a good fit for you?
If you know what kind of like functional group within the company you would like want to work at, or your best position to work at, like product, engineering, business development, sales, marketing, whatever it might be, I would just reach out to someone on the team. If you go to a company's LinkedIn page, you can see all the employees there. Just like go through the employee list and see who is, currently on the team in the functional group that you're interested in, and shoot them a note. Oftentimes, while startups may not have a job opportunity posted, there can sometimes be a way to sort of like create an opportunity for yourself. But the best way to do that is to get in touch with them. You can also go through an investor in the company if you have a relationship with them. But I found that approach to be most helpful. That's what I did when I personally was looking for jobs for myself. And so that kind of worked for me, just doing that cold outbound, but making it targeted to, what you're interested in and where you think that you can add value.
Got it. There are a couple of questions around the investment philosophy itself. So these are, I think, more around seed investments or early investments. There are three real sub questions under here. So for seed investments, do you have any perspective on single versus multi-founder organizations? How important is an advisory board relative to other key indicators? And finally, how much traction do you feel is necessary before you make that investment?
So for us, we really look for, I think, multi-founder organizations, or really an organization where there are there are team members built out. I think talent is probably the single biggest indicator of an early stage company's success, because what that means is the founder or founders were able to kind of accurately communicate the vision for their business in such a way that they can get other people as excited about it as they are. And I think that kind of level of clarity around what the business is today. Obviously, it's going to change many times over time, but that kind of clarity on like what the business is today and really solving a particular market opportunity or pain point, we think is a big sign of success. On the flip side, I will say, answering your last question, when it comes to traction and revenue, we don't actually look for that at all as an indicator of success. We don't feel that there's a certain kind of revenue or traction number necessary for us to consider an investment at Equal in particular. We know that, in a number of industries and, within certain business models, within certain industries, like the path to scale is going to look very, very different. True hockey stick growth is flat for a while before it goes up. And so if we have conviction in a thesis and if we have conviction in a team, and we think that revenue growth might be kind of flat, I don't know, through like a couple of rounds of funding, but we know that it's going to go up because, again, conviction in the thesis, conviction in the team, conviction in the market opportunity, that's something that we would be, comfortable leaning in on. Again, I will say, like, every investor will answer that question a little bit differently, but that's specifically for Equal how we kind of think about things. And again, we'll differ from, business model to business model within, every industry that we look at. And then finally, answering the second question, an advisory board, I, can be really helpful. Not always like a huge key indicator of anything. So I think compared to, the other 2 points that I just answered, maybe a little bit less of like primary concern for Equal in particular.
Great, thank you. I think those were very detailed answers, and also those were pretty much all of the questions in the chat. I just have one more question from me, unless there are any other questions that the audience wants to ask. Are there any books or any specific piece of media that you recently read or encountered that you would recommend for anyone that's trying to get familiar with the climate space or the energy space?
Yeah, I think Climate Tech VC does a great job of putting out kind of like more long form content in addition to just general industry and market updates. And I think, in general, like climate, energy, sustainability, everything in that bucket, it is so nuanced and it can be so complex. So really figuring out the resources that can kind of distill things down into terms that are much easier to understand, I think is super helpful for learning. And I think that Climate Tech VC is just a great resource for that. I think that there are a couple of people who just tend to tweet really great climate thoughts, and I'm definitely going to miss people. So this is just like a very high level initial list, but some people on Twitter like Duncan Campbell and Susan Sue and James McGinnis, who James is also the CEO of David Energy. So give a little shout out there. I think tend to just put out some really interesting, like quick thoughts on Twitter on, climate news. And that can be a great way to stay up to date and really keep a pulse on what's going on in the market, not just from a, funding and, more like venture standpoint, but also just general like market catalysts and market happening standpoint.
Got it. And I guess with that, any other last bits of advice that you would like to share with the audience of climate job seekers?
Now's your time. I mean, it's a great time to be diving into climate. Like I said, there is so much opportunity in the market. If you are interested in something in this space, like go out, apply for that job. If you feel like you want to go out and start your own company, go out there and start your own company. I think, like I said, now's the time. It's been really, really interesting and exciting to see the developments of the past like 2 years. And climate tech, it makes me excited for all the years to come. And so yeah, I think everyone is very well positioned to kind of really like get at their passions and what gets them excited.
Thank you. I think that's a really great note to wrap up our discussion today. I just wanted to thank you again, Simran, for the very insightful presentation. I really enjoyed our conversation. I just want to remind everyone of 3 places that you might want to look at. One is workonclimate.org. The second one is innovateclimatecareers.substack.com. And then of course, equal.vc/portfolio. That's where a lot of the companies that Simran covered today, as well as the David Energy jobs that she covered today are posted. And I believe, Simran, you put your email into the chat as well.
Yeah, my email is simran@equal.vc.
Great. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And a big thank you again to Simran for sharing so many insightful bits of knowledge and experience. Anything you would like to add, Pranav?
Oh, thank you, Simran. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm running a little bit of a cold. So yeah, I was going off repeatedly, but I think the Q&A was amazing, and so much, the value that you've provided, I think the insights that you provided, really helpful. Really appreciated that. Thank you so much for being here. Yep.
Yeah, of course. Hope you feel better soon.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. So this is the second event in our Climate Investor Series, and you can expect another event in March as well. So watch this space, and thank you for joining us. Have a good rest of the day.
Stay safe,
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Bye.